Hello, I'm Dr. Catherine Horton. After I made 2 videos about psychopaths as the root cause of a lot of the problems we have in the world, and another video about psychopaths and organizations and how they rise to power and how they influence the culture inside an organization, I would like to make a video about how to recognize psychopaths, simply because they are so dangerous, they are so devastating in our organizations. We should all sensitize to their behavior, to their characteristics, and actually help each other recognize them and guard against them, and also make our organizations safe against psychopaths. Now, in my previous video where I explained psychopaths inside organizations, I also explain how in these pyramid organizations, through the process of capture, gradual capture, psychopaths will eventually put any organization that we have, if you wait for long enough, into deep capture. So they will capture an organization and use it for their own means. And that is essentially inadvertible. And that is also because it's a result of their need for power. They need to climb ever higher and get ever more power and to control more and more people. And this innate drive in psychopaths, combined with our pyramid organizations that taper at the top and that give people at the top so much power, invariably lead to a situation where the oldest organizations or the biggest organizations with enough layers will always end up dominated by clinical psychopaths. So given that these are the sort of organizations we had for millennia, it follows that by now most of our organizations, the older ones certainly, are essentially already in deep capture by clinical psychopaths. So it should be very, very easy to pick out psychopaths by now. And it turns out that yes, indeed it is. But if for the very first time, if you're meeting this topic for the very first time and you're not really sure what psychopaths are essentially, for reasons that might have to do with physiology, it's still being researched, they essentially lack empathy with other people. They have no feelings for others. They certainly have feelings for themselves, a lot. They consider themselves quite important, but they do not empathize with other people. And essentially, the best way to think about it is maybe to think that they treat other people like objects. So you, for example, wouldn't necessarily empathize with your toaster. You wouldn't empathize with your car. You just use your toaster to make toast and you use your car to get to work. And psychopaths will do exactly the same thing. They will just take the people around themselves and consider them objects. Now, if you have a psychopath who's under a boss and this psychopath considers the boss to be an object, of course at some point you just want to get rid of that thing. This is how psychopaths would think. Assume the role yourself and then control all the other objects, as in people, to your own ideals. So considering people as objects is typical of psychopaths. Psychopaths also to need ever more control. That's also very typical, this need for power to rise ever higher. And then the third characteristic is the use of enablers. So enablers are people who will allow the psychopath to do something. It will be either connections or actual things that the enabler can do for the psychopath. And the psychopath, because he or she uses people like objects, will scout out who the people are who can enable him or her to do something, and will just use them. Pretty much in the same way as you might go to the shop and look for a piece of electronics that might allow you to do something. You would just acquire it one way or another, buy it hopefully and pay for it, and then use it. And that's also how psychopaths operate. So they will, instead of using gadgets, they will also use people, pretty much like normal people use gadgets. Now, when someone is the victim of a psychopath, these sort of traits will be devastating. So the actual suffering, the pain a victim might feel will not register in the psychopath's mind. He or she will literally have no caring for that whatsoever. But also the psychopath will work very insidiously around the victim. And experience shows that what psychopaths like to do with their victims is isolate them. So they will programmatically analyze what sort of communication channels a victim has and systematically snip them. and then create an island, like a spider kind of going around the prey and then, you know, doing whatever the psychopath would want to do. So isolation, the disruption of communication channels, that's a very psychopathic thing to do. And then ultimately it is essentially psychopaths also want this sort of confirmation of their power. So they will look for ways to confirm it and reconfirm it just to, you know, for their own entertainment. And that could be making the victim do certain things that the psychopath wants. That will be confirmation that yes, the victim is still operating under the psychopath's wishes. And then also eventually humiliate the victim. So find ways to somehow humiliate or even maim and kill. And those are essentially ways to degrade the person, to put them even lower below the psychopath, and ergo, you know, confirm the power of the psychopath. So, sorry, I'm looking down on my notes because I wanted to go through quite a lot of things, and in the beginning I didn't want to miss out on these things. But essentially, this is how psychopaths operate, and because they are now at the top of all organizations, I already said that essentially most of the organizations are captured by psychopaths. So if you think about what are the organizations most likely to have accumulated psychopaths, these are the oldest organizations. And there are also certain organizations where psychopaths have a, if you like, a competitive advantage because they don't have feelings for others. And one of those systems is, for example, the military. So if we're looking for psychopaths at the top, the military is perfect because it is very hierarchical. It's also very compartmentalized. So psychopaths in one department will not be picked up necessarily. It's very, very regimented, so people have to obey. That very much appeals to psychopaths. So now the question arises, are there any sort of signs that psychopaths have been accumulating at the top of our militaries? Because the militaries are ancient, they are centuries and millennia old, the concept of the military and the general setup. So they have been around for millennia, so by now the military must have been in deep capture pretty much everywhere around the world, at least once, and typically once it's in capture, once it stays in capture. Now, what sort of features can we think about that would indicate that there's some sort of psychopath at the top who shaped the military? If you want to answer that without actually looking at any one individual, just most generally, we have to look at maybe unusual features about the military that don't have an actual function with regards to defense, but purely a function towards confirming the power and the control of the lead psychopath. And if you think about it for some time, then, I mean, if you're actually in the military, you might have a very, very long list indeed, what those things could be. But for everybody who is not familiar with the detailed workings of the military, one of the things we all know are military parades. That's when the military literally parades past the population with their tanks and airplanes sometimes, or helicopters, but, you know, traditionally just marching soldiers on the pavement through a city or through a parade ground. And those parades are actually a gold mine to pick up psychopathology, because if you look at military parades around the world and throughout the ages, one of the things that might strike you, still today in fact, is the weird movements of all the soldiers. So, you know, everybody's familiar with the goose stepping and so on and so on. But if you look at essentially any army around the world, this could be, you know, US Army, British, German, Russian, Chinese, it doesn't matter. Everywhere around the world, if you look at military parades, what will strike you is the odd way of marching. It's a very unnatural, very controlled, and sometimes, depending on the particular parade, it can also look quite, well, how to put it? Well, very funny. Extremely funny instead, in fact. So you might actually look at a parade and almost laugh as you see these soldiers, you know, parade past, lifting their legs higher than their knees and just all march like that. And I leave it up to you to actually go online and search, video search for this, and have a look at a couple of things yourself. And one of the things that you'll recognize that this is not normal walking. So what is the psychology behind this? Well, this is a classic example of psychopaths at the top. Because what this is to a psychopath, think about it, you have some military leader who will be on the tribune watching this parade, and you will have next to this person, or also on the tribune, a head of government. So someone else who's at the very top of a very old organization, and very likely also a clinical psychopath. Now these lead psychopaths will be standing there, and in front of them will be a parade of people who are all top trained soldiers. And every single person will be typically stronger, fitter, and much more physically powerful than any of the people standing on the tribune watching this. So think about it. You have these rather, in comparison, weak, typically men, stand there, and they manage to achieve that men in the hundreds, if not thousands, who are all stronger than them, walk past them, essentially making themselves look silly. Right? This is it. This is essentially a power spectacle for clinical psychopath. And anybody who is a psychopath will understand that this is what it is, because they will just look at it, look at all those soldiers marching in uniform, which to them will look like objects, and then in the back of their minds, they will, like children, think, oh, what can we make those objects do next? And then bit by bit, you have this parade where people start marching around, or are made to march around in ever more ridiculous setup. Now, a military parade and this sort of weird goose stepping, or whatever you want to call it, has no function in terms of national security. There's absolutely no reason why it would have to be like that. But it is everywhere around the world. And it is like that because what it is one lead psychopath demonstrating to another how well he can control all those essentially trained assassins to dance to his whim and parade past looking utterly ridiculous. And you might not like this sort of assessment. I personally am not trying to actually denigrate the military, much the opposite, because I think the function of the military is not goose stepping on a pavement through the city centre in peace times just to make someone else feel very big about themselves. This is not what the military is there for, yet they're made to do it. So you'll recognize that this doesn't really fit the picture. The other thing too, which is also typical actually of psychopaths, is, and this also falls into the category of humiliation, and that is military uniform. But not combat uniform, which has to be functional, so there has to be a defense, a protective element. Therefore, the military uniform that you actually wear to combat is very, very functional. It doesn't have any frilly bits. Not necessarily, but in comparison, the actual uniform people wear in, say, as uniform in peace times, or as their, ceremonial uniform, might have elements that are utterly ridiculous. And famous examples, for example, are the think about the guards in London, the guards protecting Buckingham Palace. They have these big furry hats that serve absolutely no purpose and make them look a bit silly. Now again, what that is traditionally is the psychopath who owns them signaling to other psychopaths, look at me, I can take all these fully trained assassins, put them in front of my house and make them wear that. And I can even make them parade past their own family and the entire city wearing that. Right? Maybe this has not occurred to you, but that is pretty much what it is, because there's no other reason why it has to be like that. Now, if I'm right, then the oldest, one of the oldest militaries should have this sort of feature in the extreme, right? All we're talking about is an old organization where enough time has passed for psychopaths to accumulate at the top, right? Who then want to control the military. Now, one of the oldest militaries, and certainly the most famous out of the oldest, is the Swiss Guard. And now think about how the Swiss Guard are dressed. Below the video I include pictures of how the Swiss Guards are dressed, and just look at it. Go down into the description and click on the link. of what a Vatican Swiss guard looks like. These are, the Swiss guards have been used in the Vatican for particular reason, and that's because the Swiss mercenaries were the best trained and most deadly assassins, right? They were incredibly successful, and traditionally so, and this is why they're the bodyguards of the Pope. But look at how they are dressed. They are in clown outfits. They are in little clown outfits. These are the best trained, right, most lethal assassins, and they are in clown outfits. Do you see? There's absolutely no reason to put them into those puffy little outfits. It's not practical. It's certainly not combat wear, but they look like that. And I was trying to find out where it comes from. I heard the rumor that, oh, Michelangelo designed the uniforms, but I just did a quick search, and it turns out, and yes, just look at the pictures I include. I mean, look at the men who have the square jaws, or testosterone through the roof, right? Big, broad shoulders, and if these men were standing in actual combat gear, they would be truly scary. But as they are, well, you just really think about Krusty the Clown somehow, right? Anyway, so the actual story behind the Swiss guards, apparently, and this is according to the Vatican's own website, which I include below. At the very bottom of the article, it says the contemporary uniform. It is mainly thanks to Commandant Jules Repon between 1910 and 1921, who was gifted with an exceptionally fine taste for colors and shapes, that the Swiss guards wear such fine dress today. After much study and research and drawing inspiration from Raffaello's frescoes, he abolished all types of hats and introduced a simple beret worn today, which bears the soldier's grade. Blah, blah, blah. Furthermore, he replaced this and that and so on and so on. Hang on, I think it's below. Yes. So the uniform is described and so on, and it is commonly thought that the uniform was designed by Michelangelo, but it would seem rather that he had nothing to do with it. However, Raffaello certainly did influence its development, as he indeed influenced fashion in general in Italy in the Renaissance through his paintings. So much about the Swiss guards. It was a guy called Jules Repon who actually drew up the uniform as it is today. However, it seems to go back all the way to Raffaello, and it seems to be the case that also back in the day it was very similar to this. Anyway, either way, right, all I said is that you need an organization where enough time has passed that you have psychopaths at the top who would like to use their power, you know, and display their power, and you'll end up with these, frankly, ludicrous outfits. So this is the warm-up exercise. So the Swiss guards are essentially a classic example. Military parade, the goose-stepping, ridiculous goose-stepping in a military parade are prime examples, and they are displays, they are shows of the psychopath's power. The ultimate power of controlling hundreds and thousands of trained killers to your own whim and make them look ridiculous. Okay, so that's a warm-up exercise. Then I would like to actually play you a couple of clips, and I would like to leave it up to you to actually identify the clinical psychopath. However, before we launch into that, I would like to do the following. I would like to, first of all, refer you to a wonderful discussion about psychopaths. I mean, the details are horrifying, of course, but the discussion itself was great. It was Thomas Sheridan, J. Weidner, and James Corbett of the Corbett Report. And I think it was Winnie Eastwood's radio show where they discussed psychopaths in great detail, and I really encourage you to listen to that, because it's, I think, a 1-hour interview, but it pretty much says everything that is to be said about psychopaths and how to recognize them, with a lot of nuggets. So I will refer you to that for further information about psychopaths. And I'll Yes, exactly. The next thing I wanted to do is actually do a psychopath test with you, because as I'm talking about psychopaths, maybe you thought, well, you know, I like to control people, I like power, I like to rise to power. Am I a psychopath? Well, it depends, because psychopaths have got different features. But one of the things that is most deadly about psychopaths, and that's probably the aspect that we should worry about most, is when they not just don't mind hurting people, but when they actually enjoy it. So this is what you have to really worry about as well. And I came across a set of adverts which I personally would call the psychopath test. And this is the Mountain Dew adverts. I include the link to them below, and I encourage you to watch. I think it's a 3-minute clip, and within the 3-minute clip are 3 separate adverts that, as I understand it, Mountain Dew, I think it's a drink, and they brought it out, these 3 adverts, one after the other, but together they are a story, and I encourage you to actually have a look at this story. Stop this video now and watch it, and just watch it and also gauge your reaction to it. What is your emotional response as you're watching that video? Just stop my video now, click on the link below, and then come back to this video when you've watched it and when you've assessed your own gut feeling to that video. Okay, so I assume that you had enough time now. You paused my video. Please do pause it. Do it the right way, because it is very much about your gut feeling without actually hearing what I've got to say about that. So the video that you should have gotten through to was one where essentially a goat, and it's kind of ridiculous, you know, the actual story, but a goat is playing the role of a gangster. Now, in the back of your mind, you should also keep in mind that, you know, we have all these problems these days in the world with Satanists, and Satanists running amok, and Satanists sacrificing people and children and all this sort of stuff. So picking a goat might have more content there than is actually immediately obvious to the eye. But doesn't matter. That aside, a goat is impersonating a gangster and essentially mistreats women, and is then picked out by the police, and there's this, you know, roundup, and the victim has to pick out the goat. And in the actual lineup, the goat is threatening the woman. It's not clear if he's just staring at her, or if he's somehow, you know, his mind can be read by this woman. He's just broadcasting his thoughts, or he's just looking threatening. But in any case, she panics, and then she essentially runs out screaming. Now, if you watch this video and you're normal, I would say to you that given that this advert was so utterly daft, you either thought that it was just a bit weird and maybe funny, but a bit daft, or you were actively sickened by it. So depending on how normal and how intelligent and how, you know, empathetic you are, if you're very empathetic, you should have been utterly disgusted with it, totally revolted. Especially the 3rd clip, the last one. If you're a psychopath, however, you will have absolutely no consideration for the feelings of the victim, and you probably thought that this video was either hilarious, absolutely hilarious, or maybe very funny but also a bit silly, but hey, or else you actually thought it was sexually arousing. And that is the most extreme of the psychopath spectrum. Why would it be sexually arousing to a psychopath? Well, that's because the victim is actually shown with severe injuries, disheveled, so this sort of denigration and humiliation, you know, essentially with the woman as well, to mutilate her face, to make her look disheveled. That already triggers arousal in clinical psychopaths who are also sex offenders. And then have her so intimidated that she's screaming, and this sort of screaming in panic is, unfortunately, highly arousing to these sort of psychopaths who are also sex offenders. So if you actually thought that this video was hilarious, or worse still, that you actually thought that this was arousing, well, then you're probably a clinical psychopath. And I'm not sure if you can be treated, but you really have to be taken care of somehow. Anyway, so this is the psychopath test, and if you watch that, maybe you thought, oh well, it's just a video, but unfortunately this is just how it is. And essentially, the more extreme the sexual arousal, the more extreme the amusement about the humiliation of another person, or the more careless even, the more carelessly it's watched, the more it's an indication of a clinical psychopath. Okay, now this was the actual psychopath test. Now let's launch into the actual exercise, right? The thing about I'm thinking about which example I should start with. Yes, let's start with really simple ones. Now the exercise is how can we spot psychopaths in real life? And I will start with a couple of very simple exercises, which is I've included, at no point will I include a video in my video at all. I will just be talking about it, and that's because I don't really want my videos to be taken down because of copyright issues and all this stuff, but also because I actually want to encourage you to have this sort of interactive activity that you actually pause my videos when I say so, you open the description below the video and click on the link that I've included. Or if someone breaks my links, you actually search for it yourself and find them. And this bit of interaction and interactivity should trigger your brain and get you to think, not just stare at my videos like some sort of idiot. So it is for these reasons that I will keep my videos very low tech, but the video I would like you to look at is essentially the very first video, the very first link below, which says real life examples, is a video that was leaked by Chelsea Manning. And this is RT America showing the footage from a US Apache helicopter as it's essentially killing people. And this was part of the WikiLeaks, videos. Now, I want you to actually watch the video. It's 5.5 minutes long. And just listen carefully to the language and the amount of, of emotional content in the video. So please, stop my video now and have a look at the first link below. Okay, so if you watch that video, one of the things that you should notice is essentially the utter lack of caring. To these men, it is like a computer game. They might as well be just talking about debugging a computer program or something like that. Nevertheless, people are being murdered through their actions, but their actions are so low level. They press a button or they trigger something on a technical equipment, and on the other end somebody dies. And in this case, somebody who's utterly innocent dies, and actually many people who are totally innocent die, just carelessly. And then also on top of that, listen carefully to the conversational tone, to the very casual tone. Also listen to the nicknames, the actual nicknames that they give each other. It doesn't fit the image at all. It essentially doesn't fit what the hellsoever. Now the question is, are we dealing with outright psychopaths, or are these people just not getting it? And that goes into a very, very important division here, because as I said, when psychopaths capture organizations, you have, if you look at my video about psychopaths and my video about capture, you will notice that you will have a mix of both. You have genuine psychopaths, and then genuine psychopaths controlling useful idiots, right? And those useful idiots I term essentially weaponized morons, because they will be used as a weapon, typically. So what we will have to do in the following videos to actually, see what's real and what's not, look at all the videos and decide, is it A, normal, as in normal policing, normal national, security, etc., or normal government work or whatever, right? So is it A, normal here, right? Or is it B, weaponized morons, right? Or is it C, psychopaths, right? Is it a psycho? These are the three options. Is this normal behavior? Are these just weaponized morons? Or are these actual psychopaths? Now, in that drone operator video, those people must be utterly and totally stupid not to know what they are doing. But psychopaths above them have this ability to actually brainwash enablers. So those guys who you hear talking in the WikiLeaks, they could very well be clinical psychopaths. I think it is likely. I think it is likely that they are, because I don't think a normal person would ever get to be in the position that they are. But it is grey zone. I think we'll find an intermix of people who are essentially psychopaths and couldn't care less, and people who are utterly thick. Right? Now, in that particular video, I think it's mostly psychopaths, but in other situations like that, you'll also have a big admixture of weaponized morons. And that's because psychopaths are 1%, 1 to 4% of the population. Idiots, however, are a much larger fraction, right? So, you know, it's much more likely to be actually weaponized morons than psychopaths, purely statistically. Okay, the next video I would like you to look at is essentially, let me have a look. Oh yes, now this is just 45 seconds, and the next video is from it's a cockpit video, again an Apache pilot, and this time he actually sings Bye Bye Miss American Pie as he's firing the missiles. Have a look at that video, just 45 seconds, and let me know what you think. So, what do you think? What's your impression? Do you actually think it is normal? Is it normal to be singing whilst you're murdering somebody? It's not. It really isn't. Now, in this case, if you're totally thick, you might not necessarily start to sing, right? And if you did, it would be maybe a random song because you just don't understand. But this guy seems to be able to operate sophisticated technology. He seems to be able to respond to commands and respond to the situation. So in that case, we are actually dealing with a clinical psychopath. That's what they are like. And also notice that it's not just that he's singing something very, very sarcastic. There's an extra level of humiliating the victim. It is laughing at the victim, and that is essentially typical of a clinical psychopath. So there you have literally live, you know, not live, but you have directly a clinical psychopath in action who then proceeds to murder somebody in that clip. And he's very, very pleased with himself. It doesn't get any more psychopathic than that. So that is most certainly this category of an actual, you know, clinical psychopath. Okay, the next video I had is, again, sorry, I had to show it to you. You don't have to watch the full 4 minutes. The third video is again Apache helicopter footage, and before people, you know, think, oh, I've got this thing about Apache helicopters or, you know, drone operators in general. No. In that video, it's not even about the footage anymore. In that video, it's about the video itself and the person who has actually made the video. Now, just please stop the video, stop my video here, pause it, and go down and in the description look at the third video now. So, what do you think? Is this normal? You have essentially footage of how things are being shot to pieces, set to cheerful, empowering, happy music. Is that normal? you know, someone actually sits down and makes a video about, you know, their favorite compilations, about, you know, how things are being shot to pieces. Is there any sort of thought towards the victims, or whose homes are, you know, there, or what exactly is it, who was in those vehicles, what exactly is going on? Is it even right that, you know, thousands of miles away from home, foreign soldiers are shooting things to bits? Is there any sort of discussion of that? No. But someone actually went away and made a compilation and put in this video, this music. And I would say that this person is clearly a psychopath, in my view. I would say that very likely that is what a psychopath would do. And then essentially just have the well, how to put it, the enjoyment of the event, and just see essentially things blow up. Of course, this person could be just utterly stupid, you know, like a really stupid kid that that just found these videos and thinks it's funny and then makes a video like that. But overall, I would say it's more likely to be a clinical psychopath. Okay, now this was the easy bit. This is now essentially the warm-up for how to spot psychopaths. Now we're going into a couple of examples which are essentially yeah, much more to the point. I would like you, and this is now not the army anymore, before people think psychopaths only appear in the army. Remember, psychopaths will rise to the top of any organization. So we should find them anywhere else, right? And we should find them in organizations that give people a lot of power and control over others. So the next video I would like you to watch is yeah, well, this is also maybe an easy one, right? I mean, it's not particularly hard. So I want you to watch the next one, which is essentially the interview of LLOYD BLANKFEIN in the US. So that's a video. This clip has been taken in. It's part of a longer film about the global meltdown, the global financial crash, and it shows a brief clip how LLOYD BLANKFEIN is behaving in this Senate hearing, and how Phil Angelidis is behaving, who is essentially questioning him. And I would like you to pause the video now and just watch the video and compare the behavior of the two men. So, what's your opinion? What did you see? Right? What did you see? You had on one hand Phil Angelidis, who was asking normal questions and, you know, non-confrontationally. And then on the other hand, you had LLOYD BLANKFEIN, and his body language is striking, isn't it? It's the way his eyes are really wide, how he's, every time he responds, to me, it very much looks like he's launching into an attack. And there's one bit where Phil Angelidis, who's, by the way, he is on the panel, so he is asking the questions. LLOYD BLANKFEIN is meant to answer them, and Phil Angelidis can't even finish his sentence before LLOYD BLANKFEIN actually launches into a very aggressive counter-statement, to the point where Phil Angelidis even lifts his hand, closes his eyes, lifts his hand and goes, okay, right? That is a submissive reaction. And it's hard not to give it, not to stop the other person and say, okay, don't attack me. And this body language of closing the eyes and looking down means I had enough, right? Not more of that. But LLOYD BLANKFEIN ignores it and keeps going, right, in a very aggressive manner. Now, what this means is that he doesn't have any sort of empathy towards the feelings he just generated in the panel. He also doesn't really think about, hang on a second, is this a good thing or a bad thing if the entire panel is maybe feels the same? There's absolutely no consideration for the feelings of others. And this is just not even taking into account what that Senate hearing was actually about, which is essentially this destruction of thousands of people's lives and the entire US economy, essentially, if not even more. So nevertheless, you have this powerful man, and he's got absolutely not even enough time to allow the other person to finish his sentence. He just doesn't care. Now, normal, it certainly isn't. And by the time you get to Lloyd Blankfein's status, you're also not talking about idiots anymore. So I leave it up to you to decide. Do you think that's an indication of a clinical psychopath? Would psychopathology actually explain what we saw in the financial crisis? If Lloyd Blankfein were a psychopath, would we expect him to behave like that? And if he were a psychopath, would we trust him with our pensions? Should it be the case that our pensions, or your pensions if you're in America, are entrusted to men like that? Should that be the case, or are our organizations in urgent need of an overhaul? Has the financial crisis actually made our planet more efficient? Has it generated more GDP, more of everything, or has it subtracted? Okay, I leave it up to you. So then the other another thing is the other video I would like you to look at is a video of Sabine McNeill, who is a mathematician and a systems analyst, but also very engaged in social issues. And the video that I've linked below is one where she is in front of the EU and EU Commission, and she's making the case for children. And I leave it up to you, and what I ask you to do is have a look at the body language of Sabine McNeill, and have a look at the body language of the panel that she's talking to. And yeah, make up your mind, see what you think. Please stop my video now and have a look. Okay, so what do you think about that? Is there anything odd about that video? I mean, apart from the fact that Sabine McNeill is fighting, because it seems to be the case that 1,000 children seem to be disappearing or you know, being taken away in the UK alone per month. So she's talking about thousands and thousands of children being removed from their parents for highly dodgy reasons that really shouldn't be the case. So she's making the case like that. She says, I don't even have children myself. So she is, with her voice trembling and essentially so agitated that everybody in the room can hear it. She has this incredible amount of empathy towards thousands of children that are not her own, towards the parents of those children who are to be taken away. You know, she talks about them, so she is empathizing incredibly with other people and thousands of other people, and she's making the case. And meanwhile, you've got the panel, and I think it's at after the first 30 seconds, at 28 seconds, there is essentially Sabine says something, and the entire room applauds when she says that. And then the person presiding at the front says, please respect the committee, do not applaud. Respect the committee, do not applaud, when it's about the case of thousands of children disappearing and a woman fighting for the right of the parents. Well, not disappearing, but being taken away. I think that's the main issue there, right? And people express their empathy with Sabine McNeill, empathizing with those thousands of victims, and they applaud by shared empathy, essentially, in a shared cause. And then the statement is, respect the committee. So it's not about the children, it's not about the parents, it's not about these parliamentarians actually standing up for a cause. The most important thing is to respect the committee and do not applaud. This, actually, after everything I said in the beginning, what does that tell us? Well, first of all, the committee, an abstract construct, is placed above thousands of children and their parents. and even the parliamentarians themselves. The committee is above, so that's already an artificial construct of power above all the other people. And then do not applaud. Why? It is the EU, right? They are the last people on the planet to claim that they are so time efficient that literally 5 seconds of applause, that's what's gonna bust the schedule. I don't think so. I think all of us have seen enough of the EU to know that it's nothing to do with actual time efficiency here. Respect the committee, do not applaud. Well, what it actually is, in my view, it falls squarely into the operation of psychopaths. Psychopaths do not want their victims or the objects around them to network, right? Because for them it's like having these objects, almost like the Internet of Things, talking to each other, and they are left out. They are not in control anymore. So what it is about is the applause is instant communication. The entire room is applauding. It's instant communication to SABINE MCNEILL that the entire room agrees. We are all behind you. We are all one. This is a wall of agreement. On the other hand, psychopaths hate that, because then they are up against a wall of agreement. It's like as if all your home utilities and kitchen appliances ganged up on you. You're gonna get angry, right? Now that's what it is. Do not applaud. Do not communicate with each other. Do not stay isolated so we can control you. It most certainly isn't, right? Do not applaud. Where in the world have you ever heard people getting seriously upset about applause? Unless you applaud in the middle of a concert, right? But anywhere else, when someone's speaking, applause being a bad thing? No. So normal it is not. Is the panel just too stupid to understand that? Well, I don't think so, because they seem to be able to run a committee. So, I don't know. I leave it up to you to decide. Okay. So that was it. Oh yes, and actually I want to stay on that video, because if you watched it to the end, at 5 minutes and 15 seconds, there's another aspect where essentially the same lady, so SABINE MCNEILL, she finishes her speech, or thought she finished, but then she's got more time. And watch that carefully. Watch the face expressions of the people on the panel when she's given more time. Just go back 5 minutes and 15 seconds, I think it was, and have a look at the face expressions. Suddenly, SABINE can express herself in more detail, and how's that received? And remember, she had 5 minutes, so thousands of children are being taken away, and they really shouldn't be taken away by social services. And she has 5 minutes, and then she spent another, minute talking about it. Right? Do you see it now? Do you see it? So there are all these really odd things, and what you have to watch out for is essentially the cutting of communication channels, leaving people isolated, humiliating them, degrading them, eventually maiming and killing them. Right? And in that video, on the previous videos, there was tons of it already. Okay. Now another thing I want to say is, does anybody remember the leaks from, I think it was Guantanamo? And what has turned out about Guantanamo and Guantanamo Bay, the actual the prison, was the sort of methods that they used. And one of the things that has been leaked was a method used by the doctors, so-called, or whatever they were, on the inmates, and this method was called rectal hydration. Now, I think, if I remember correctly, what they did is essentially just, if you want to really inconvenience or kill a person, if you don't give them food, they might live for a week before they have kidney failure, or maybe longer if they're Gandhi. But if you actually take away water, I think people die after 3 days. I don't remember what the actual deadline is, but it's essentially very, very bad. So if you take away water from somebody, they are going to die very quickly. It's one of the most cruel things that you can do. And if I remember correctly, the inmates were deprived of water, and to prevent them from dying, they were essentially given water, but not to drink, but it was just squirted up their rectum. And that's what's called rectal hydration. It just keeps the body essentially supplied with water just about well enough so that the organs don't shut down. Okay, now let's just have a think about that one, right? We have these doctors, okay, and it's Guantanamo, you know, already, so anyway, but let's say we have this prison, and this prison, the inmates are there because essentially they were fighting against the US in this faraway land, and I think a lot of the people who were there, I'm not sure, I can't remember the exact statistics about the inmates of Guantanamo, but they were either from the country where they fought, or they traveled to their country having, you know, either the same religion or, you know, some sort of affiliation with the country. Okay, and then we have the US with literally billions and billions with, you know, airplane carriers, choppers, Apache helicopters, tanks, everything, you know, rockets, you know, missiles, the works, right? Literally rolling into that country and taking over an entire country. Okay, and then we have a bunch of people, and we're literally talking a bunch because Guantanamo is not like they are accommodating 50,000 people, right? So I don't remember the exact statistics of the inmates, but it's, I don't know how many there are, what, 100? 150? I mean, something like that, right? But it's not 150,000. Now, this is now the big picture. We have essentially a bunch of guys there. And now it's claimed that these people have to be held there and tortured to get information from them. Now, what sort of information could they possibly hold in their head that would be so relevant after years and years of being locked up? I mean, is it literally cold fusion, you know, the key to cold fusion, or is it, I don't know what, like green energy, or what the hell do these people have in their head that is so valuable that literally drones, surveillance planes, you know, surveillance this and that, and radar that can map the entire country and every building from the sky cannot discover? I still don't understand to this day. So if you look at Guantanamo itself, I would say, is this normal policing? Is it necessary for national security? Or is it very much like the frilly uniform of the guards? Is it something frilly? Because if it's not security, then it's something frilly, right? And we know where the extra frills come from, how they are motivated. Okay, so that's now the premise. So already, you know, you could ask, are people that flaming stupid, that literally you have the upper echelons of the leadership, the military leadership, thinking that there must be something so amazing in these people's heads, in these inmates' heads, that they just have to get at it. Literally all their spy planes and spies and drones and surveillance, this and that, will never discover this amazing piece of information that's so necessary and that can literally turn a war where heavy equipment and thousands of soldiers are involved somehow against them. Are they that flaming stupid, or are they that psychopathic? And I would say, I mean, I know the army is not exactly known for winning Nobel Prizes in, you know, in chemistry, but still, I don't think you can be essentially a weaponized moron and be heading the army. So very quickly, by just thinking about it, we get to the stage that actually Guantanamo must be a psychopath's power game. That's what it is. It's essentially showing to the world, hey, I can do this. This is utterly ridiculous, like having goose-stepping soldiers, but I can do this and get away with it. And everybody lets me. Right? What this is essentially a psychopath's power display. Okay, now this is the big picture. So Guantanamo is already a psychopath's power display, in my view. Because I cannot, if someone can explain to me the crucial implications of the information held in those inmates' heads to, you know, national security, I will essentially make a video and put out corrections. But until then, I hold this view. Now, the other thing where we started is you have this setup, and then the way they want to extract information from these inmates is by rectal hydration. I don't know. Is this normal? I mean, before that leak, I'd never come across this concept, so I don't think this is normal, is it? Or do they do that like regularly in interviews in the US Army? Is that how it works? I don't know. Is that normal? I don't think so, right? Is it totally stupid? I mean, it's literally, if you, maybe someone is so idiotic that they just thought, yeah, this is the way to do it. No, I don't think so. So again, what's on display there is essentially a psychopath's power game, right? And the entirety of Guantanamo is essentially a psychopath's power display, and within that, psychopaths are given the freedom to live out their predilections. So this utter whacked out doctor who did that, there is no actual sense in this for national security. Right? He's a doctor, so he must have passed some exams, so he can't be totally sick in the head. No, he's a psychopath. He's just a psychopath having fun. I mean, if you don't actually believe this, try to imagine this sort of setup in a court of law, being questioned in a court of law. What would you say? Would you say, well, I personally would say, Dr. X, excuse me, so, were you really under the impression that the entirety of the US national security, with billions or trillions rather, trillions of dollars worth of heavy duty equipment, rockets, satellite surveillance, you know, tanks, missiles, you name it, right? Thousands and thousands of soldiers was pivoting on rectal hydration? Really? I mean, what did you expect to hear from the person, the inmate, the patient? I can't call it the patient, it's the victim, right? What exactly, what sort of information could you possibly derive from rectal hydration that could tilt the national security situation of the US? And those are precisely the questions one should ask. Because to anybody who is normal, who is genuinely normal, it should be clear as day. As soon as you hear that, you should say, you should immediately think, hang on, is this genuine national security, or is it a psychopath? Because if it's a psychopath, it means that parts of the US Army are in deep capture by clinical psychopaths. And that is a situation of national emergency, because psychopaths are not normal. Psychopaths will not act normally, and psychopaths are utterly devastating. So as soon as you have deep capture by clinical psychopaths, that is bad. Right? Because a psychopath will not think about national security at all. A psychopath will think about him or herself. Because national security requires a sort of empathy towards the rest of your nation. But psychopaths do not have that. Right? So, as soon as you have this sort of situation, it should be clear as day, and everybody should be screaming from the top of their voices, deep capture by clinical psychopaths. Every single time you come across these things of a total lack of empathy, of humiliating the victims, and especially this rectal hydration has absolutely all the textbook features of clinical psychopaths, because it's humiliating, it has a sexual element, so sexual humiliation. It's utterly pointless, but it goes for maximum torture. And it's textbook, basically. And when you come across these things, it is your duty to be aware of what psychopaths are. It's your duty to know how absolutely devastating they can be in human organizations, how dangerous it is when they actually get to the top, and it is your duty to speak out. Thank you for listening.